are just a little way from the heart of the village of Hambledon on a small estate, and 4 gardens in Hambledon will be open this Sunday to the public. And this is one of them, Little Mead. Now, shall we have a quick sneak preview? Come in. The garden was first created almost 38 years ago. Look at that herbaceous border. Even in this monsoon, they're all standing up straight. A pot of agapanthus softens the driveway up to the garage doors. And behind, the fresh green of the conifer bed with heathers, and beyond, 2 beautiful trees just thrown in for free. Now, the gardener behind all this, and the owner, is Ken Moon. And frankly, he's the first gardener on That's Gardening who refuses to come out in the rain, so we've got to do him indoors. I can't blame you for not going out in this today, Ken, but how is your garden still unbattered, even in this downpour?
Well, we've had several weeks now of very dry weather, and I think the plants have all responded to this very welcome rain, the first for a long, long time.
Where did you learn to garden as well as this?
Well, it all started many years ago when I was in the service and the war had ended, and I went on this course. I remember the advice well that one should study one's wife and provide, sort of consider what views she had from the house.
So while Stella's slaving away over the washing up, she does at least have something beautiful to look at.
Yes, she hasn't got quite as much to complain about there.
You have a beautiful vegetable garden. Now that really is laid out with loving care.
We have tried over the years to sort of grow almost everything for the house. I must admit now that the ornamental side is increasing all the time and the vegetables are getting less. But we do appreciate fresh vegetables, and we do try to grow as many things as we can.
It's quite an open garden. When you're working in the front and round the side, people come past and ask you things?
Yes, one has to be prepared for a lot of interruptions when they're out in the garden. A lot of people stop and look, and heads come over the wall, and I think the reason I know as much as I do today is the fact that I've been answering other people's questions. Many people see me out there. And,
you wouldn't go out there for us today in this rain.
No, there are limits. However, you brought fate with you, I think, and however, we didn't want the rain. Well,
everything's going to have a very good water for this big day on Sunday when you're open for the Red Cross Day.
Yes, we are looking forward to having a nice crowd, and hopefully they'll have some sunshine to see the garden in, although sunshine isn't the only thing.
This must be the wettest garden we've done yet. And things never go quite according to plan, do they? Because you'll never believe it. This week's Helen's Hint is all to do with saving water. Golly, this looks all wonderful in here.
Well, this week, Fern, I've got a brand new watering system to show you.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Well, this side has got a more powerful system with jetters because I want to give with beans and cabbages and calabrese lots of water and a good sprinkling every day, and sweet corn and courgettes too. Now you have a supply tube which runs all the way down, and I've cut it at the end so you turn the corner, and again there, and it goes right up to there where you end up with a sleeve. Now this all comes in a box, and do make sure you read the instructions first. That is really important because it takes longer to read the instructions than to actually do the job. And the pipe comes very, very rigid, so pop that through a bucket or a bowl of hot water so it's nice and pliable to put down.
Not kinking up around the plants. Now there's another little system coming off the end there, like a little branch line. What's that?
That's right, that's the dripper system and mini jets. And that's for younger, more tender plants, more delicate maybe. And a dripper system for the tomatoes as well.
Now tell me honestly, was it difficult to do?
No, not really, providing you read the instructions carefully and actually draw a plan if you want to, because it doesn't necessarily have to go in a polythene tunnel or in your vegetable garden. You might want it all around the flower garden and to do hanging baskets. It does a massive amount of work and watering.
It looks very complicated with dog leg joints and things. Could you be a central heating plumber now?
I should think so, quite easily.
And how big a garden would it do in the kit?
Oh, just an average garden. This is an average polytunnel, and it just works.
How much was it?
About £30.
That's not bad, is it? The only problem is, of course, that we're supposed to be conserving water.
Oh, we are with this system, most definitely. About 4 litres an hour, which is really good, and you are actually only watering the plants. You're not watering paths, fences, your neighbour's hedge and all that sort of thing. So this is where it really scores.
You know you said about it not spraying the neighbour's fence?
I did, yes.
Just look at us.
Oh, right, I think we better get changed.
Shall we? OK. It works.
Lovely atmosphere in here, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, yew really is a fabulous plant, isn't it? Has a sort of ageless, timeless quality, and that one could well be something like 150 years old, much older than the rest of the garden that I've been looking at. This is actually the garden of Hambledon House, and I can see it's a lovely garden, but it must be a garden with problems because it is clearly on a chalky soil. I can tell that by seeing how well the clematis do here, and verbascum, another lovely plant that likes chalk. And one of my favourite little shrubs that I've seen just coming into flower, that's Ceratostigma wilmotianum. So gardening on chalk does have its benefits, but it has its drawbacks and it has its problems. I think the way to find out how they've been overcome here is to talk to the garden's owner, Mrs. D. Hart-Dyke. Dee, have you found the chalk in the garden to be a blessing or a curse, really?
Well, it's quite hard work, I must say. I have to constantly dig in as much humus as I possibly can. And I do all sorts of curious things like putting wet newspaper at the bottom of each hole before I put in a plant, because I find the roots then go down to it and it conserves the moisture, and then eventually rots down into kind of compost.
Does it matter which newspaper you use?
Well, I use every sort of newspaper except the colour supplements, which
right.
I did.
not colour supplements. One thing does interest me, your roses do pretty well here. I was admiring the Ferdi down here, which is a rose I'm fond of because it flowers so late.
Yes.
Problems with them on the chalk?
No, surprisingly not with this one, and the rugosas on the whole do quite well.
Sequestrine is what one traditionally thinks
Yes.
of giving to plants on a chalky
Yes.
soil. Do you buy it by the cartload?
Well, I do, and magnesium I also give Epsom salts.
Keeps them moving.
Yeah, that's right.
And I noticed we're standing next to lilies, lovely lilies, my favourite of all, in fact, Lilium regale.
Yes.
One thing I find useful is to move lilies in pots into a border where there are still gaps.
Yes, well, that's a very good idea, because in fact the only lily I've been able to grow is regalia.
How long have you been here? I was looking at that yew earlier, which has clearly been here for
It's great deal
getting on
longer
for 200
than me,
years,
yes.
actually. Yeah. Oh, yes.
We've been here, well, we've been gardening here for 5 years, so it's really not very long. But we did inherit these lovely walls and trees and some very good planting of shrubs and trees by previous owners.
How long can you look ahead in your garden planning? By when would you expect to see the garden as you would wish it?
Goodness, I wonder if it ever looks really as you would wish it. But I suppose in another 2 or 3 years, I hope, it'll begin to look as I imagine it. Yes, I hope about 2 or 3 years.
It's true, you know, you really do learn something or are reminded of something in every garden that you visit. Just looking at the plants around me here, I've been reminded how many lovely things there are that grow and thrive and in fact need chalk. And also looking around, the value of the colour blue in the garden at this time of the year. There are a lot of lovely blues in here. But you can also see why, when you've got a lot of room in a garden, why the Victorians eventually gave up borders entirely of herbaceous plants. They are so labour intensive, and these days, given a big area such as Dee has, a mixed border of shrubs and herbaceous perennials makes so much more sense. Lovely garden, isn't it? Well, after the break, we shall still be in Hambledon. We shall be at the other end of the village, a completely different garden up the hill there, and we shall be calling in on our old friends, the Fosburys, and seeing what they're up to in Kent. I hope you'll join us after the break. Welcome back to Hambledon. But before Fern visits the local pottery, let's just call in on our friends, the Fosbury family, where Richard has a problem with testing his soil.
Well, I must admit, Stefan, I don't know anything about pH. I know nothing about chemistry, and we've got to know, especially up here, what kind of soil we've got to grow different vegetables. So what we do then, Stefan, we use a simple pH meter that when we put it into the soil, it gives us a number. We're not worried about acid or alkali. It just gives us a certain number. And we've got a chart here, and the number corresponds with what vegetable we can grow in that soil. We then go to the soil we want to analyse, and we dig out about 2 or 3 inches. We put water into it.
Rainwater.
This is rainwater, yes.
If you use tap water, that'll affect your pH reading depending on how hard the tap water is. So you must use rainwater or you know, distilled water, battery water.
Okay. We make the water disappear in the hole, so we get a nice piece of mud. And then we stick the pH soil meter into it up to about 2 inches from the top, and we turn it round 2 or 3 times. Then the number we've got in the soil, we can then see what kind of vegetable we're going to grow.
I mean, what you say is fine, Richard, and that will give you a pretty crude indication of your soil pH, but don't get too hung up about it. You see, I mean, looking at the chart they supply here with the meter, I mean, it implies that you can't do certain vegetables above certain pHs.
But
you
that's
can,
right. Oh,
you can, but you'll not get such good results.
Right, that's a question I was going to ask you. You've answered that. Now, we rotate our crops. Now, where we see the onions growing now, next year we probably want potatoes or tomatoes. Now, we know the pH there has got to be lowered. Now, how do we lower the pH?
Well, if that's 7.1, you probably just about get away with it. If it was much above that, then your potatoes would get scab, and so you want to lower the pH. The only thing really that will do it effectively is by using sulphur.
Ah. Now, is sulphur organic?
Sulphur is, well, as far as I'm concerned, it's organic. You dig it out of the ground.
Yes.
So you go along to a garden centre, you buy special garden sulphur, and that will tell you, they'll give you a chart.
Yes.
Read your pH, your present pH, read the type of soil, and it'll tell you how much sulphur to add.
Okay.
And that changes to acid in the soil and brings the pH down.
Well, that's wonderful, because that's been a headache to me and John. We knew how to do it inorganically, but not organically.
But having taken care of the soil problems, Richard's brother John has a bee in his bonnet about potatoes. And in his own inimitable way, he wanted to tell us about it. Right, roll up, roll up. This is the great gardening contest of the year. John, take us through it.
It's got a simulator boxing ring because it's a very important match. Now, this is a preview of a match that's going to be held later this year to determine the best potato for the British crisp industry.
High stakes.
A high stakes indeed. The prize for the winner is a staggering £400 million a year.
Oh, it's even more than Bruno, isn't it?
It is more than Bruno. So without further ado, let's introduce the contestants. In the red corner,
Oh, an ugly brute.
champion for the past 44 years,
Yes.
and father to 2,000 million bags of crisps a year, and that takes some doing, that's why he looks haggard, Mr. Record.
Right.
And the challenger in the white corner, named after a Scottish castle on the island of Arran, Mr. Brodick.
Great pink hope.
Potatoes have to be stored at 5 degrees centigrade. Now, unfortunately, at these temperatures, Mr. Record produces sugars.
And a bag of sugar, right?
There's ways of solving this. The potato, 2 weeks before it is actually made into crisps, has to be taken to elevated temperatures. They store it at between 10 and 12 degrees centigrade. But unfortunately, that's got its drawbacks, because at that temperature, it produces sprouting.
Like vegetable spaghetti.
Well, it's slightly exaggerated, but it produces sprouting.
Okay. Yes.
Brodick doesn't sprout, and it can be stored at 5 degrees centigrade without producing sugars.
Right.
So far, that's a head-on points, I'd say. Now then, the potato, to stop these sprouts, has to be sprayed with a sprout suppressant.
Sprout suppressant.
Which isn't very desirable.
Right.
Again, Brodick doesn't have to be sprayed with it. No bother at all with it. It is truly a potato of the 90s, as it's very environmentally friendly. Next year they will be available to the general public, and it is up to the public, of course, to decide whether the Brodick is a winner or whether it isn't.
And the next stage will be the potato that comes ready salted. You know what I mean, Harry?
Oh, something's happening. I don't quite know what this will be. I'm actually at the Clanfield Pottery, home of Roger and Sarah Money. They make the most fantastic garden pots. I think I'll leave it to Roger to show you how to really do it. Roger, do you ever know what it's going to be before you start?
Well, I have some idea in my head what it's going to be like, but sometimes, because of the way the clay is coming, I have to change it.
Do you have disasters as well?
Oh, yes, plenty of them, as illustrated by that tub full of muck there.
And it looks like you need enormous physical strength to do it.
With the bigger pots, which are upwards of 40 kilograms I have thrown, which is a lot of clay, you do need physical strength.
How did you start?
Well, it was way back, really, at school when I was 13. I did art, and the art teacher wasn't well, he didn't know much about pottery and had a pottery class after school. We learnt together, and that was where the love of clay came from. It was just a teacher saying, would you like to join a pottery club? And there was about 5 of us, and that's where it started.
The colours and designs that you put on top of the pots, where do they come from?
Well, they're coloured slips. Really, that's just clay with a coloured oxide in it, and it colours up when you fire it. And it's just a layer, really, you put on the pot, like painting a canvas.
Behind you, you've got this lovely anniversary pots, 50 years of marriage.
Yes. Now, when this pot is fired, it actually will change completely, because the clay that's now this sort of dull orangey colour will turn a quite bright terracotta orange. The black will go quite a vivid black, and the bit in the middle will go bright yellow.
You've got one outside that's full of water plants.
Yes, well, that's a new version. We're trying it out because we do all our tests on the patio, and you can have miniature water lilies and things like that. We've actually had frogs in there this time, but whether they'll survive or not remains to be seen.
Now, how can you tell that they are going to be frost-proof?
Well, these ones we've tried and tested over 15 years, the terracotta ones without the glaze, and there we do say to customers that they are frost-proof. The ones we've had problems with are the glazed ones, because the water tends to get trapped inside, and then the frost comes and it chips the glaze off, so we do advise the glazed ones are actually brought in the winter.
How many do you throw in a day?
The actual throwing bit takes about 5 minutes, and then the drying out normally takes about 4 weeks, at least, and in the winter it's probably 6 weeks. And then in the kiln, well, that's a couple of days, and then it's done.
How about the family? Do they get involved in
Well,
this?
yes, in fact, Charlotte this is for her granny and granddad's golden wedding, and she's drawn the middle bit. They're not actually into clay at the moment, though we're pushing it.
What about your wife?
She does all the admin side, and she does the decorating of the name plaques. She does all the shop side, the selling side.
Any odd requests from people?
Yes, in fact, it must have been about 6 months ago, someone wanted a large jug to go in a pond, because they wanted the water to come into the jug and pour out the lip. And I thought, what a lovely idea. So we do sometimes get some very good ideas from customers because of special requests.
Can people who have never done it before, may not have any artistic bent, can they be taught how to throw a pot?
Yes, I mean, as with any skill, you learn, but it is practice, practice, practice. It's like playing the piano. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And it is really a hand-brain coordination bit. That's what it's all about.
Spectacular must be the word for a view like that, and it would be worth climbing this hill above Hambledon village just to see that. It could be the picture of a calendar that says beautiful Britain, couldn't it? But there's even more reason for coming here, because at the top of the hill is quite the most wonderful small hillside garden I have ever seen. This is just a little tip of it. Well, I think I'm pretty fit, but I wouldn't want to do this every day of the week. It really is a quite incredible slope. And I have to say that over the years, I think I've been asked more about the problems of creating a garden on a sloping site like this than almost anything else. So I'm fascinated to see this. The spaces, all the spaces utilised, there are plants crammed in everywhere. The way to find out how it's done is to see how the owners set about it. It's the garden of Sheila and Ferdi Ferdinando. I assume they must have had a vast amount of gardening experience to create this. Obviously, gardening on this site is tremendous hard work. You must have done a lot of gardening of this sort before.
Not actually on a slope, but I married a tall wife, you see, with plenty of reach. That's my success. That's the story of my success.
Well, let's start at the beginning. What was here when you came? In fact, how long ago was it?
1970 I bought the property. There was a lawn here, though it wasn't level, it was sloped down. We built it up to this level. But the old chap had kept it cut. There was a long bed there and a little round one here. The laburnum existed.
But not a lot then?
Not a lot, but it had the view, you see. My
Yeah.
most marvellous view, and that's what seduced me.
And looking around, the secret, it seems to me, of stabilising and gardening this slope is not to depend wholly on terracing, but to depend on vegetation to hold the thing together.
Absolutely.
But physically, it is jolly hard work. I was looking at some steps earlier, and just imagining, I mean, just laying those slabs on that slope is no easy job, is it?
It's no easy job. I found, of course, you have to begin from at the bottom. that's the essential. And I dig into the bank. Sometimes I hit chalk, which is, you know, you can't get a better foundation than chalk. I use that to anchor one side of the slab. And then I build a low wall on the bank side to stabilise it.
And how long would it take you? There's one long flight of steps I was looking at, basically from the road right up to the top here.
Yes. The way I've always worked is to give myself a target. Each evening I said I'll do 3 slabs. But as they weighed 82 pounds each, the slabs, I began to falter a bit as I got to the top.
Why did about 182 by the time you got to the top?
By the time I was at the top, I was doing 1 a night.
How do you divide the labour? What does Sheila do? Carry the slab.
Well, no. She's my authority on ground cover and weeding and generally looking after the garden, really.
But on the weeding side, I mean, well, you're looking as if you're going to say there are lots of weeds. I don't see any.
Oh, Lord, you should have been here yesterday.
No. That's what they all say. I don't believe that for a minute, because you've got so much ground cover, that must keep the weeds under control.
That's why she does it, of course. I mean, as she's the bosun in charge of killing the weeds or getting rid of the weeds, she's going to be keen on ground cover, isn't she?
One of the things that I find so endearing about this garden, there's a lot of little oriental artefacts about the place.
Oh, yes. I've tried to make it oriental, and even outside of the little oriental garden, I think there's a bit of oriental influence, isn't there, in the rest of the garden?
Also, lovely little touches that one sees. You've got little coins embedded in the stones at different turns of the path.
Don't tell the mint.
Well, not tell the mint.
Yes, copper coins. I can't afford the silver. We're diarists too, but it's difficult going back over, you know, we've been doing this for 20 years. It's difficult to pinpoint the year you've done something in. So we can go to the coin or the carving and go to the year's diary and see how we did it and what we did.
One thing also fascinated me, among your oriental artefacts, near the pool there, up at the top of the garden, there's a lovely bronze, I think it's a bronze urn. With nothing in it. Why haven't you got a plant in there?
It's a bronze urn. Sheila and I found that. We were down in the West Country, Truro, and we decided that it would be my burial urn for my ashes. That's good, isn't it? I mean, it's sort of insurance. You're never going to die if you've got something waiting for your ashes, are you?
I must say, Ferdi, either inside your urn or out. I hope you stay here forever.
Thank you very much. Lovely.
Well, I promised you good gardens. It's remarkable, isn't it, what you can find just in and around a small village like this one. That's all I'm afraid we've time for, though, from Hambledon this week. Next week, something on a very much larger scale, the 3rd International Flower Show at Hampton Court. So I do hope you'll join us then. But for now, from rural Hampshire, goodbye.